Welcome! The Employment and Career Counselors at Nokee Employment and Education Center have prepared this session to enhance your chances of success in getting the job you want. So you've been invited for a job interview. Congratulations! Remember that at this stage, the people who want to interview you see you as a strong candidate. They want you to be successful and look forward to meeting you. A typical first interview can last from 30 minutes to an hour, but there are different types of interviews with different formats. If you don't know what style your interview will take, it is a good idea to ask in advance. Let's take a closer look at the different types of interviews you might experience. Depending on the method of contact the interviewer is using, we can have a phone interview, a video interview, or a face-to-face interview. Depending on the number of people, a panel interview or a group interview. Depending on the place where the interview is taking place, an on-the-spot interview, a restaurant interview, or an off-site interview. Depending on the structure of the interview, we can have a structured interview, an unstructured interview. Depending on the type of questions, a traditional questions interview, behavioral-based questions interview, competency-based questions or job-specific questions interview, and a case-based interview. Other types of interviews are informal interview, second interview, and final interview. Let's get into the details. Depending on the method of contact, we can have a phone interview. While you're actively job searching, you may need to be prepared for a phone interview on a moment's notice. Most of the time, you will schedule an appointment for a phone interview. If the interviewer calls unexpectedly, it is okay to ask them politely to schedule an appointment. A phone interview may be for a position where the candidate is not local, or for an initial pre-screening call to see if they want to invite you in for an in-person interview. You may be asked typical or behavioral questions. Video interview. Perhaps you have applied for a remote job or you're interviewing for a position in another city, province, or country. Software programs such as Skype, Zoom, and FaceTime are making video calling easy, and video interviews are becoming more common. Finally, you can get to have a traditional face-to-face interview. Depending on the number of people that participate in the interview, you can have a panel interview. In a panel interview, you will be interviewed by a panel of interviewers. The panel may consist of different representatives of the company, such as human resources, management, and employees. The reason why some companies conduct panel interviews is to save time or to get the collective opinion of the panel regarding the candidate. Each member of the panel may be responsible for asking you questions that represent relevancy from their position. A group interview. Many times, companies will conduct a group interview to quickly pre-screen candidates for the job opening, as well as give the candidates the chance to quickly learn about the company to see if they want to work there. Many times, a group interview will begin with a short presentation about the company. After that, they may speak to each candidate individually and ask them a few questions. Depending on where the interview is taking place, you may have an on-the-spot interview. Sometimes you'll be expected to do an on-the-spot interview. For example, you may turn in your application and be asked to do an interview right away. Or when an organization announces they will be holding a job fair or open interviews on a specific date. In situations like these, hiring personnel use on-the-spot interviews to screen applicants and immediately decide who should and should not be included in the next steps of the recruiting process. Restaurant interview. One of the reasons employers take candidates out to lunch or dinner is to evaluate their social skills and to see if they can handle themselves gracefully under pressure. Remember, you're still being observed when you participate in a job interview at a restaurant, so use your best table manners. Off-site interview. Perhaps there is no local office, or maybe the employers do not want current employees to know about the possibility of a new hire. In that case, the employer may schedule job interviews in a public place like a coffee shop or restaurant. Depending on the structure of the interview, we can have a structured interview. A structured interview is typically used when an employer wants to assess and compare you with candidates in an impartial way. Essentially, the interviewer asks all the candidates the same questions. Unstructured interview. An unstructured interview is a job interview in which questions may be changed based on the interviewee's responses. While the interviewer may have a few set questions prepared in advance, the direction of the interview is rather casual, and questions are based on the direction of the conversation. An interview may have different types of questions. Here are the most common ones. Traditional questions. These are questions about the experience on your resume and about what you can offer to the company or position. Behavioral-based questions. These are questions based on common situations of the job you're applying for. Competency-based questions or job-specific questions. These are questions that require you to give examples of specific skills. Case-based interviews. These are questions where the interviewer gives you a business scenario and asks you to manage the situation. Check our video on types of questions in a job interview to get more details on how to approach them. Other types of interviews are informal interviews. This is more of a casual discussion than a typical job interview. Second interviews. You passed your first interview and you just got an email or call to schedule a second interview. This interview will be more detailed and maybe longer. Final interview. The final interview is the last step in the interview process. Now it's your turn. So now you have an idea of the most common types of job interviews. No matter what type of job interview you go on, always do your best to prepare for it ahead of time so that you can show them the best of who you are. The best way to prepare is by doing a mock interview. A mock interview provides you with an opportunity to practice for an interview and receive feedback. Although you can do an informal mock interview with a friend or family member, a mock interview with a career coach, counselor, or university career office will give the best feedback. If you want to book a mock interview with one of our experts, contact us right away. Here's our contact information. Get in touch.